everybody, my name is Aisha Neal, aka Tia, and today I'm going to talk to you about the difference between primary and secondary sources, as well as scholarly and popular sources. I'll also talk about when they are best used when researching and making your essay. Starting off, I'll show you two sources and comment down below which one you think is a primary and secondary source, and we'll come back to them at the end of the video. First, I'm going to talk about the difference between primary sources and secondary sources. Primary sources allow you to get close to the study or event, so you won't find too many opinions in these types of pieces unless they are from people who were at the event or study when it happened. These sources will be first-hand accounts such as theses, assertions, scholarly journal articles, original artwork, interviews, and autobiographies. This source talks about the possible effects learning an instrument can have on literary skills. So I'm not going to make you read this entire source because it is way too long to read right now, so I'll link it in the description. In short, this source analyzes the experiment the authors used, and it shows that there can be a link between rhythmic processing, the speech sound sensitivity, and literary skills, which suggests candidate mechanisms for improving reading skills via music education. The authors Reyna, Hilda Fed, and Bruce McCandless keep the source neutral, and the most opinionated sentence is the hypothesis, which is required to be opinionated. Primary sources like this one are best used when you're talking about something scientific or want to have more credibility to your argument if it's a persuasive piece, or more strength if it's a narrative piece. Moving on to secondary sources, these types of sources interpret or analyze a study or event. These are basically everything except direct accounts of a study. So these pieces can review studies, events, or just be someone's opinion. To emphasize, the person who wrote the source must not have been in person for the event or study for the source to be a secondary source. For example, here's an article posted on hopkinsmedicine.org that goes over the possible connection between music and certain brain functions. The article does explain an experiment that was done, but the overall article explains what benefits music can have. The experiment included musicians improvising music under an fMRI and determined the different areas of the brain that lit up. If the article was solely about the experiment done, it would have been a primary source. But since the overall topic is different, it's a secondary source. Secondary sources are helpful when you want to see the after effects of an event or study, or when you want to get other people's opinions on that event or study. Now, since we covered primary and secondary sources, we will now go over the difference between scholarly and popular sources. Starting with scholarly sources, they are exactly like they sound, made by scholars. The authors of scholarly sources are experts in their field. With it being made by experts, you can expect a bunch of academic jargon, such as many prior studies of emotion in the context of both neuroimaging and pathology have identified orbitofrontal and adjacent frontal areas, as well as the parahippocampal areas as being related to the various aspects of mood and pleasant versus unpleasant emotional responses. Within the text, the focus is very specific and in-depth. The overall layout of these sources is very structured. In this text, there is an abstract section, an introduction section, and a conclusion section, along with other sections. I know that from the pictures you see, it seems really boring to read, and in some cases it is, but some do come with charts and tables. Looking back, the audience of these sources are generally for scholars, researchers, and students. These sources are often evaluated by peers who are also experts in their field. The purpose of these sources is to communicate research findings and to educate the audience. Now we're going to move on to popular sources. These are really common since they are made for the general public. The authors of popular sources are bloggers, staff writers, and journalists. Their focus is pretty broad, unlike the scholarly sources, and because there isn't a lot of academic jargon, it is very easy to read. Just glancing at the article, the format is very attractive with images to attract their audience, the general public. The purpose of these sources is for entertainment and to convey news. Sources like these are usually edited by in-house editors, or they're not edited at all. This article made by Luke lists the different benefits of music, such as improving memory, focus, and IQ scores. Starting with the author himself, it is listed as him being an enthusiast of meditation and personal development. Even though he is very interested in these topics, his interest does not make him an expert. The article is similarly structured like a scholarly source, but things like the font and pictures help you determine that this is a popular source. Moving on to the content, the article's purpose is more for entertainment or news than it is to educate. And before I wrap up, we're going to go back to the two sources in the beginning. This first source, Music on a Brain, is a secondary popular source because it analyzes a couple different experiments done by other people. There's no real structure, and the purpose of the article is to inform the audience. The second source is a primary scholarly source because the authors, who are experts, talk about the experiments they've done. The entire article is well structured, and the purpose of this article is to communicate its research findings. So to wrap up, primary sources are a way to get close as possible to events or studies. Secondary sources interpret or analyze the study or event. Scholarly sources are in-depth structured articles written by experts. And popular sources are easy, broad readings written by bloggers, staff writers, and journalists. Thanks for watching the video. I know this is typically a different video from what I usually post, which I haven't done in a minute, but thanks for supporting my videos, and I hope you have a great day.